Sport Business. Global Sports Intelligence.
Hello and welcome to the Sport Business Podcast. I'm John Rest, Chief Correspondent of Sport Business. This week we are in the newsroom looking at some VPN and tourism board controversial sponsorship deals. And we'll also have a look at Disney Plus's move into French football and a little bit of electric motor racing on the side. In the second part of the podcast, we won't quite go inside the deal. We're actually going to go inside the company and look at OneFootball, a platform that a few years ago looked like it was on its deathbed, but has now recovered under the rule of CEO Patrick Fisher. And the third and final part of the podcast, as always, we will have any other business and a look at the week and months of the sporting calendar ahead. Joined, as always, by Martin Ross, and this week in the newsroom, Ben Cronin, editor of Sport Business Sponsorship. Hello, both. Ben, you've just come back from a not quite a sunny holiday in Ireland.
That's right. I've been in, Donegal, sunny Donegal for the last week. They call it the wild Atlantic way for a reason because it didn't stop raining while I was there, which was actually quite a nice relief from the heat wave in London.
Yeah, heat wave number 5, I think we're on, not Mambo number 5. Martin, how's the Scottish heat wave?
The grass is very green, very, very green, but it's always been very green this side of the border. Do you like my mug?
Oh, Commonwealth Games mug, excellent.
Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games. I can confirm there's tea in it and not Kool-Aid before you accuse me of...
You've just boosted the merchandise revenues by £1.90. Well done.
This was £4, reduced from 8.
Well, there we are.
I also bought a cap and a hoodie, so I am single-handedly getting them up to their revenue target on commercials. And yes, currently, it's that time of year when Scottish teams are kind of losing to outfits in Europe which sound like Wi-Fi passwords, Rangers being the most recent example. I'm in this kind of perennial cycle of kind of disappointment and despair around football where I went, at the end of the last club season with Rangers, I was just desperate to get that over with and turn towards the World Cup. And at the end of the World Cup, I was desperate to get that over with and turn to the club season. And I'm now 3 competitive games in, already looking to the Nations League as a sort of possible saviour for managerless Scotland to boost my spirits somewhat. So, yeah, ready to move on to next season already. And you haven't even started yours. So there we go.
No, we haven't. I'm recording on a Wednesday. I'm going to the friendly at Arsenal tonight. It's my 6-year-old's first ever kind of Arsenal game. So he's very excited.
He's playing?
He's playing. Well, we might have to play at the back. We're short on defenders. No, playing against Como, the return of Cesc Fabregas to the Emirates. So he's extremely excited about a friendly. So
look out for the Revolut logo. It's huge. You'll see it from your seats.
I will.
Como's new shirt sponsor, Ben, I believe.
Well, talking about sponsors in football, Ben, you did a story this week about NordVPN, quite a controversial deal with a Premier League club, Aston Villa. What's that all about?
Yeah, Aston Villa have been courting controversy recently because they've done the deal with Visit Rwanda. That was criticised when Arsenal had a deal in place with them through fan groups. And now this category, as Martin has alluded to on the pod previously, is somewhat controversial. Javier Tebas, amongst others, coming out recently and criticising FIFA's deal with a VPN company because of the role of VPNs in disguising people's IP addresses when they're pirating sports content. So somewhat controversial. NordVPN had a deal with Bologna FC in Serie A previously. Serie A has since banned sponsorship deals with VPNs, and that deal fell through as a result of that. So, yeah, controversial. And the Premier League, we've been told, has been keeping a sort of a watching brief on this. They weren't best pleased. We heard that the Premier League board expressed its displeasure when Tottenham did a deal with ExpressVPN, but Villa has ignored some of the heat around the category and struck a deal with them, emphasising, I should say, that it's about cybersecurity and not obviously talking about piracy or anything else. And we should be clear to state that VPNs, are not enabling piracy. It's a conduit for sort of disguising people who might be doing various things and perhaps accessing streams that might be geo-blocked in a specific market, that type of thing.
Interesting what Serie A did, because obviously they've been so hot on, clamping down on piracy. CEOs come out before and said, if we can eradicate piracy, our media rights are going to be earning, are going to be worth so much more. Interesting that they've kind of had such a stronger stance than other leagues at the moment, or perhaps, that stance will get stronger as more deals are done.
I mean, despite Tebas criticising FIFA's deal, there are VPN deals in Spanish football, so they're not banned there. There's a differing stance, but I think it's an evolving picture. And there was that case in France where VPN providers were asked to block sites that were enabling pirating of Canal Plus's exclusive rights, from what I remember. So it's an evolving story, and I think it's going to become even more controversial with time. But the VPN providers are arguing that VPNs are used for other things, and we use VPNs at Sport Business when we want to have a look at what sponsor logos are in different markets. We use a VPN to check who FIFA sponsors are in Australia. So there are other uses for VPN, but there's definitely a link between them and piracy.
Yeah, I mean, we should also make the point, I suppose, that there's two ways that this is kind of controversial from a media perspective. One being that you can use a VPN to sort of mask your IP address, obviously, to use a pirated site, or you could circumvent geo-blocking to watch a league via a broadcaster or service to get around the sort of domestic rights restriction. That particular issue came up again this week in Scotland, where Rangers have a deal with NordVPN, and they sent out a tweet about, they're our official partner and you can get 75% off their cybersecurity plans, etc., to which fans picked up on the back of it and told other fans, you do realise that if you buy a VPN off them, you can subscribe to Rangers TV and watch every game. So the peculiarity up here is that Rangers TV, if you're living outside the UK and Ireland, you can watch every single match in any competition as part of your annual subscription, which is kind of takes on an additional level of nuance from the rights holder point of view, because if they get lots of subscribers to that money flows into Rangers. Whereas if they get lots of eyeballs to the central broadcast deal, the money goes to the league, of which Rangers get a bit. But either way, you are diverting away from your domestic rights holder, which is the bigger problem for the leagues and why it's so controversial. And it's interesting that different leagues and clubs are at different stages of this. The Premier League, they haven't overtly come out and talked about this, have they, Ben? Or do we have any idea if there was a suggestion around the Tottenham deal, was it?
Yeah, so it was the Premier League board apparently expressed its displeasure. It went down badly, the Tottenham deal.
Right.
They haven't come out in public and said anything about it, but we just heard from speaking to sources that one was a bit controversial. And we heard the Squid Game Netflix deal with Tottenham was also a little bit controversial with the league because it was seen as being competitive to some of its media deals, I think, with Amazon.
Is that because they were blocking people's view when they were standing up in front of the ad boards? Or is that just pre-match?
Is that a Squid Game reference?
Yeah, they had them all standing up, didn't they, in front of the LED boards. I think it was pre-match. I presume it wasn't during the game. But they had kind of Squid Game models all standing up. This isn't Villa's only controversial sponsorship, Ben. They've had a bit of a run. What's the other one and what the wider trend around that?
So, the other one is Visit Rwanda. Because of the heat that Arsenal got for that one from fan groups, they were criticised because of the alleged human rights record and the fact that they've been accused of supporting rebels in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So that one was somewhat controversial. And I think from talking to Francesco Calvo, who's the CRO at Villa, I think his attitude is that the club can afford to be a bit more edgy because we're in the squad cost ratio era. If a sort of slightly edgy deal with Visit Rwanda is the difference between keeping Morgan Rogers or a player like Morgan Rogers or not. I mean, I know they've lost him anyway, but he suggested that fans might be a bit more...
John McGinn was the name you were looking for, Ben.
He's staying, isn't he?
Yeah, he'll be there forever.
He'll be there for the long term, won't he? So they're prepared to be a bit more edgy. And you could look at Barcelona. I mean, I did an interview with the commercial team at Barcelona and they said because of their member-owned model, they were prepared to take more risks where sponsorship deals are concerned. And you can see that in some of the deals that Barca do. And Calvo used to be at Barcelona, so maybe a bit of that philosophy has followed him to Villa.
Going from East Africa to West Africa, we've got a deal that we reported on this week. Not quite a deal, certainly talks, we understand, between Sunderland and Visit Ghana. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So this initially came through a story in the Ghanaian press. The Speaker of Parliament in Ghana has been shooting from the hip, and he said that they were in advanced discussions with Sunderland about a front of shirt deal. Then we looked into this, and actually the source we spoke to who were close to the club said that there are ongoing discussions there, and it is a viable option for them, although nothing has been agreed yet. So that would be another tourism deal in the Premier League. I mean, if you'd asked me at the start of the season, what are the categories that are most likely to replace betting sponsors in the Premier League. I wouldn't have picked out sort of African tourism bodies, but that looks like that could be the case.
So why then are we seeing these deals come through? Obviously, there's opportunities because clubs are looking for new partners, betting being out the window. But are we going to see, I don't know, South Sudan on Chelsea's shirt or something like that?
Yeah, it's always been an interesting one, hasn't it? And I think a lot of people looked at the Visit Rwanda deal and thought, well, what are they doing there? Is it just tourism or is there something else at play? And I know we've spoken about this on the pod previously when it looked at one stage like Visit Rwanda were going to renew the Arsenal deal, but that was a bum steer from another publication. But yeah, I spoke to a lady called Janet Camarera, who's the CEO of the Rwanda Convention Bureau, and she said that it was all about sports development. So they've got one eye on developing their under 15 team at the moment so that they can qualify for the 2034 World Cup. It's about sports internships, so training people so they've got their own sports economy in Rwanda. And she also said it's about, obviously tourism, attracting business, getting people in for sports events and business events. And when we looked into the Visit Rwanda Villa deal, we found out it's also got a few bonuses for the team playing in Rwanda. So there's a few aspects to it. And then you look at the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that one is almost like they're using sport as a sort of proxy for the conflict that was going on between them and Rwanda. One stage they said these clubs were taking blood money off Rwanda by doing deals with them because of the conflict between the two countries. But then they went and struck a load of deals. So it was almost like they said, if you can't beat them, join them. And there seemed to be a bit of mimicry when the Republic of Congo did a deal. They did a back-a-shirt deal with Lyon.
Ben, how have we managed to get this far without mentioning Asamoah Gyan, Sunderland's Ghanaian striker?
I was going to turn the tables on you, Martin, because I know you love a quiz. How many Ghanaians, apart from Gyan, can you remember playing for
Sunderland? I don't know. I mean, I'm all about Tony Yeboah at Leeds, me. Patrick Mbomba, Cameroonian.
No. Suleiman Tari, I think he was on loan there, I think.
Yeah,
and
1 season loan.
There was a John Mensah.
Oh, the centre-half.
Yeah, I think he played for Sunderland as well, but that's it. I'm sure that is it. I don't know.
Clever player.
I remember a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, do you remember talking about tourism boards and Premier League clubs? There was a deal in place between the South African Tourism Board and Tottenham. They had to put out a statement, the government, to say, I think they got so much heat about spending money on Tottenham probably, that they cancelled the deal. It was a kind of big government statement. It was a few years ago saying there's money should be better used elsewhere. So they don't always come to fruition, I guess.
No such heat for Visit Kissimmee, though. It still exists. I think Fulham and the Rangers had them as a sponsor, I think.
It's Brighton, I think.
Brighton, is it?
Sleeve sponsor, yeah.
One of the bees.
It's in Florida.
Nice place to go.
In Florida. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
And they've been, speaking of them getting heat for it being public money going to a sponsorship deal, the speaker who highlighted this deal said it's going to be privately funded. So he's been very careful to say it's coming from private sources rather than the public purse.
Interesting.
Right, John, let's keep things Florida. Disney.
Yes, good. Very good.
Yes, very good. There's been a big rights deal that Disney have done in European football. Another one, actually. What are your takes? I can give you my take, but I'm interested in yours.
You give me your takes then, your Mickey Mouse takes, and then we'll crack.
Well, this is obviously the LaLiga rights in France, which DAZN has also acquired. It's just interesting that Disney Plus and DAZN would also acquire kind of co-exclusive rights for 3 years. It means the end of La Liga on BeIN Sports France, which it's held since it launched in 2012. It's had it forever. So I suppose interesting on two fronts. There's no love lost between Javier Tebas and BeIN. Javier Tebas had a few sly digs at Nasser Al-Khelaifi, I suppose, in recent times. His quotes to Le Monde was that he sees this as an opportunity to reach more fans, not a risk of losing them, which was, interesting. BeIN are pretty punchy about this as well. They feel that the rights perhaps haven't been acquired for a rational price. And then they're in a strong position in France, given the Canal Plus relationship, etc. But a sign of Disney Plus, yes, moving into pockets of Europe with the Nordics deal that they've had for UEFA club rights, obviously the Women's Champions League. They've had pockets of stuff, and this is a concerted effort in France, which has been built up as well by Formula E, but that's not really a France deal. It does include France, but it's not really a France deal. It's much more global.
Yeah, it's over 140 territories or something, although we're still trying to pin down where the rights are exclusive and where they're not, but there's some big markets, as you say, for the Formula E deal, USA, where ESPN Plus will be the rights holder. Having lost F1, they'll have the electric version. Yeah, I thought the Liga story was interesting because you say we could have written that story two ways. Is it a Disney story or is it actually the BeIN out, I think is really interesting given...
Be Out Q, do you remember them?
Be Out Q, I do remember them, yeah, of course. I don't want to be writing about
piracy.
Yeah, talking piracy, yeah. Found that very interesting. Given the public comments from Tebas only recently at the FT conference, or say recently in February, where he kind of came from nowhere and gave another outburst against BeIN, which has traditionally been one of La Liga's bigger paymasters, and then now they've perhaps found a new paymaster.
Well, it really has. I mean, this was a deal worth 25 million euros a season, I think, between 21 to 24. And La Liga has certainly the last 10 years, but really, as far back as I can remember, if you think of Zidane and even before that, has always had star attractions. Clearly it has Mbappe at the moment, Koundé, Camavinga, Tchouameni. Too many to mention, John.
Oh, I wanted to do that one.
So, yeah, it is a sort of bona fide premium right in a big market that has changed hands to two buyers who are essentially really getting the same thing, which is interesting. So I'd be intrigued to see how they get on with users and an audience versus what they had in BeIN, whether it works out for them, but a big change.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, one to keep an eye on. There's plenty more La Liga deals coming through as well. Keep an eye on sportbusiness.com over the next week or so ahead of the new season. I think that probably closes the newsroom for another week. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. We're going to take a short break and we will be back with a look at OneFootball.
Stay ahead in the business of sport with trusted news, data and analysis across media rights, sponsorship and more. Explore our subscription options at sportbusiness.com.
Welcome back to the second part of the Sport Business Podcast. Martin, as we said at the start of the show, we're going to mix it up a little bit in this section and we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on OneFootball because you spoke to the CEO, Patrick Fisher, this week. Now, why do you think was the time for us to go in on them and do a kind of bit of a critique and a look back over some pretty tumultuous years and success stories and a real kind of gambit of of the industry? They've kind of gone from every angle.
I like the use of go in on them. Sounds very Graham Souness, two-footed. I mean, we may have been, I don't know, guilty or rightfully guilty of that in the past, maybe when things were going badly. Things are going much, much better. Why now? I suppose because they're approaching a figure in the black for 2026 off the back of very good World Cup advertising year. As you can imagine, the growth of branded content, D2C growth on the OTT side, merch side, and fan tokens. Yes, Web3. We will come to that, the return to Web3. It's also just over 4 years since the Serie A NFT announcement that deal, the Bundesliga NFT and the kind of onerous minimum guarantees involved with that, which just after that, of course, there was the huge crash of that sector, nearly turned it into nay football, as we'd say up here, or burst football. They might have had to rebrand. I've interviewed Patrick, the chief executive. We've got some figures that we're going to go into that I don't think have been reported before as to how bad it got, but also the revenue growth that there has been since and the completely resizing of the business and totally reshaping the business model. So yeah, we're going to touch a little bit upon those kind of, if you can take yourself back. Well, 4 years ago, were you writing about the industry 4 years ago? No, were you in?
I was in football world in those days. You
were between jobs writing about the industry, yes.
I was, but I do kind of remember writing about OneFootball for a long time. I mean, how bad did it get? We call it the NFT disaster.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go back to that time, it was the spell of massive hyping up of the business, but, $1 billion valuation after various funding rounds. Lucas von Cranach soundbites about, where the business was going. Lots of good stuff being done, but yeah, a huge kind of PR blaze. They, worked at the time, PR agencies, big in-house comms. They were investing in rights at the time. Now, very much so, become much more circumspect and getting on with it. But, Patrick's not shy about talking about the NFT era and what happened. He admits that says it's very much part of their story, which he describes as now as a kind of phoenix rising from the flames. The deals that were done, they came after the $300 million Series D funding round. Liberty City ventures. And in terms of how bad the outcome was, I just actually looked back at our headlines from the time. December 22, OneFootball sheds 11.5% of workforce. February 23 sheds another 150 jobs after Web3 overspend. August 23, headcount shrinks to 250. The board took action at the time. They booted the leadership out. Patrick came in as co-CEO at the time. But in terms of what really went on, how bad it got, I'm going to throw some fairly astonishing numbers at you, which also illustrates how astonishing the turnaround has been, actually. These are from official documents from the Germany Company Registry. So that in 2022, which is the year something hit the fan, or you can choose what it was. Revenue in 2022, 33.8 million euros. Personnel expenses, 26.5. Other operating expenses, 75.7 million. That includes stuff like marketing, temporary staff, higher legal costs, consulting fees, up from about 29 million. The EBITDA in 2022 was minus 70 million euros, and the net result was minus 340 million euros, which includes the full write-down of basically 144 million euros on the NFT debacle. Well, it's a bit stronger than debacle. And also the impairment charge of 77.6 million on investment in OneFootball UK Limited. They had a big operation here in the UK. So they were propped up really by shareholder loans. There's not a huge amount of detail on those in the registry document, but that was, the obvious place to go. In February last year, the majority of these loans were converted into equity. They had another financing round of 25 million from existing shareholders. The shareholders we've touched upon a little bit. Liberty City Ventures is the top one. Early Bird, another venture capital firm from Munich. And then the family office of Dietmar Hopp, Mr. Hoffenheim, SAP founder. And then all the kind of legacy shareholders around the dugout acquisitions, so lots of football clubs, including your beloved Arsenal FC.
Indeed.
But in terms of where they are now, or where they've come from since, how bad it got, and then the recovery under Patrick's leadership, not just Patrick, others as well, clearly, but revenue up 6% in 2023, up 25% in 2024. And that's quite an achievement to be building your revenue at the time of cutting the costs as much as they were. It was then up, I think, a small percentage last year. He told me in the interview that it will be up over 40% on 2026 and that they will be profitable. And just to be clear, when we mean profitable, that is an EBITDA profit over the course of the year as opposed to a bottom line net profit, which is an important distinction. But regardless, a huge achievement from where they were and what he describes as their sort of Independence Day.
Yeah. Those numbers are astonishing. I mean, you could arguably have seen them, going completely out of business, and it's a hell of a turnaround. I remember speaking to Patrick almost 18 months ago and doing a piece that was really looking at, what is OneFootball 2.0, if you like. And he said at the time, we're going to be asset light. There's zero rights buying ambition. I think a quote he said to me was, you'll not see us announcing that we acquired Bundesliga rights in Spain or somewhere. It's not going to happen, or even worse, Web3 rights. No, which I thought was a good line. Did they stick to that promise? What is the model now?
They did, yeah, very much asset light. So, a lot of the production, they'll do a lot of branded content work now, as Football Co. have done. We'll put the link to that story that we did recently. Yeah, so for example, they don't have their own production companies for that. They don't buy rights, they kind of revenue share on rights, which was always a kind of slight component of many deals, but they don't have, I think he told you at the time, maybe didn't have any rights spend. He repeated that to me. It's broken down into 4 pillars, if you like. There's the media platform, which is the app, essentially. Live ticker, scores, news, videos, all of that underpinned by advertising. Then there's the OTT live streaming, which remains a big part of the business, despite, not spending money on rights. Then merch, e-commerce, and then the kind of Web3, which is a fan token business. We will dive into a couple of those in more detail in a minute. But importantly on advertising, advertising used to be 100% of the business. It is now 75% of revenues. They used to be very reliant on the sports betting space, which they're maybe not so much now, but of course they're now looking at the prediction market space as an opportunity for growth. Branded content, as I say, is an area of growth generally for the likes of OneFootball and Football Co. So 50% of the FIFA World Cup partners, I think they did branded content for. Aramco, Budweiser. Separately, they did a big campaign with Tony Cruz for Coca-Cola. So yeah, you can see that move away in the same way that kind of Football Co. move away from kind of classic banner ads, at OneFootball moving away from your standard ad media package sale of, kind of pre-rolls, digital ad kind of package, which, they would sell for 5 figures perhaps, moving away from that and actually becoming a bit more bespoke in the advertising and enjoying the kind of rewards off the back of that.
Well, you mentioned a minute ago about a return to Web3, which would kind of make me cringe if I was a OneFootball employee. What's the story there? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different model altogether. You're not putting down a minimum guarantee. Patrick said, when I asked him about the new model now, which is a fan token model, it is building on the community, community is a good PR word, the user base of OneFootball fans.
They've got you, Martin. They've got you.
I know. Building on that critical mass, if you like, is a better word, to build a digital identity that becomes a currency. So he says that the model that they have now is completely different because obviously they're creating their own IP. They're not dependent on third-party IP. That was a leasing model where you got some sort of content for a 3-year period or assets, very much like the sound bites we've heard around media rights, of course, as well. He says our Web3 product and launching our own token is based on a future model for the whole industry. So that model says they've got 40 million logged in users at OneFootball. So that's 40 million profiles. And at a time when there's more bot traffic on the internet than human traffic, if you can have that amount of, or even a portion of that amount of real human profiles, then, and they launched their digital ID, I think just this week, the FanPass digital ID system, they can develop a token which becomes a utility. You develop rewards for an engaged fan, drive that loyalty of getting them back onto your platform. And of course, this has come with a big amount of investment in the app. It is nothing to do with putting down money for NFTs. It is completely different. It just exists in the same Web3 interspace that you and I frequent so often.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's my favorite space. They got into a bit of merch business as well, right? It's just kind of way of becoming a kind of holistic football platform. I found that quite interesting.
I think it's just Germany,
right?
But they're planning to widen that out. The interesting thing he said about merch was that he says they've got 1 million, general terms, direct-to-consumer paying customers. I don't think he just means merch, clearly, but 1 million direct-to-consumer customers. So 1 million people that give them money. They're not spending any money on sort of acquiring the customers there. And how can they monetize that user base? So in terms of ARPU, if you're selling a Bayern Munich top for, say it costs €100 in the merchandise shop, OneFootball gets a 12 to 15% rev share on that. The ARPU that they get from that, which is a decent wedge, is much more than you would through, the advertising return from a single user. So it's being clever about it. It is really leaning into that. And also, he says, kind of joining the dots from taking somebody who's watching OTT. If they watch, 5 matches, do you then get a chance to get a free football shirt and then get them into the store as well? So really leaning across. I mean, I know you covered the OTT stuff quite a lot back then. It has changed in some ways, although growth in terms of number of matches up to 11,000 matches per season, which I think is a bit more than when you interviewed Patrick a couple of years ago. I think he may have been making noises about Club TV at that time. They've now actually started to roll that out. So if you pay $1.99, you can get the video on demand stack for Man City or Inter Milan. But it's very, very flexible. I maybe mean it as a dark market solution for big leagues, which it is. But to go sort of beyond that, sort of level of complexity beyond that, beyond just unsold territories, there's also a lot of leagues now that we've seen, big European leagues, doing deals in big countries where they're selling a first and second pick, but nothing else because the broadcaster doesn't want anything else. They might be Sky who don't want more than that from the Bundesliga. So then these kind of tranche of matches which can be sold for $1.99 become attractive for the rights holder on a kind of rev share basis because otherwise you're leaving money on the table. And also actually from a user point of view, I've only watched a couple of games on there, but they've made a big thing of making it very fast. They say 5 seconds is the time that you go in and spend to transact and to watch OTT, 10 seconds on merch. But it's very fast. You remember the days of getting the laptop out and getting your card out and looking for your security code and your login. So those days have gone, and it's all part of the bigger picture of really kind of retaining customers. He gave me an interesting quote actually on their continuing role. I mean, they work in different ways in OTT. I don't want to simplify it as, it's a kind of solution for leagues. They also work with clubs, as I say. they work with a lot of broadcasters. If you go back 4 or 5 years, they started to do deals with Sky, with Deutsche Telekom, so that you could, for kind of snack size access to them. They have 60 broadcasting clients across broadcasters, leagues, federations and clubs. And he says he doesn't see a ceiling at the moment because international rights are so under pressure. And if you look into leagues and how they monetize internationally, it becomes really competitive solution, as I say, to distribute live matches on OneFootball in markets that are otherwise not fully covered or dark markets. So the way the media market is at the moment, there's always going to be a demand for that. Given how much they charge for matches, yes, I suppose that revenue is increasing, but there's a bit of a ceiling to what that can be. I mean, Bundesliga Pass, they're involved with that, aren't they, John? That's South Africa?
Well, they started off in India, actually. We did this story late 2024. We kind of got wind that Bundesliga Pass, which was, the league's direct-to-consumer proposition, went out in India first, and the Bundesliga Pass itself was carried on the OneFootball app. So kind of leaning into that kind of strong relationship that OneFootball has with the Bundesliga. They started off with second-tier matches to begin with as a bit of a test case, and then, took that into South Africa, I believe, I think Vietnam as well. Feel like Kenya was added earlier this year, perhaps Nigeria. So it's kind of been additional markets have been added on, but it's partly a test case for the Bundesliga to see how this works. There's quite a lot of tech behind it. OneFootball have kind of offered up their platform as the way to make this easier. It makes payments easier for one-off games, as you said, making that a kind of a quick process. It'd be interesting to see what the Bundesliga do with Bundesliga Pass going forward, whether it becomes a kind of primary option in some rights markets. It will certainly help them when they're having negotiations with broadcasters, having that functional system in place. So OneFootball have been strong there. In the UK, they also carried League One Pass back end of last season in the UK and Ireland. It's become a place where you can go and buy a game for a couple of quid or something. As you say, it's a partner of leagues rather than buying the rights, which got them into a bit of trouble before.
Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge, they didn't put down ridiculous sums on the media rights side. It was really the NFT gamble that hit the business, but they certainly were putting down numbers. And even in the monetization now is, as I say, it is kind of multifaceted, be it Bundesliga Pass, which is largely like a subscription really, or pay-per-view in some markets, or even free-to-view actually. Some are coming to them as a sort of free-to-view solution. Brazil, as you can imagine, is one because of their kind of non-exclusive model they often have. So yeah, he was very good value. I would point out that, we approached OneFootball back in the day, 4 or 5 years ago. They were very front foot on the comms and wanted to tell their story. There's another PR line. But yeah, I mean, this all came from us wanting to interview them and, didn't ask for any themes, any questions or anything. It was all as it should be. And he was very upfront. So yeah, it was an enjoyable interview.
Excellent. And just to round it out then, we've kind of given the story of, how they were on their knees essentially and how he had, not just him, but they have led a kind of recovery under his leadership. What does the future look like for OneFootball? Is there are they building it up for a sale? What's the next few years in store?
That was really the impression you got when you spoke to people about the turnaround. It felt like they were trying to get the business into some sort of shape that they could maybe sell it. And I remember Saudi was seen as a possible kind of destination or somebody that they may sell to. I did ask him about Saudi and, they continue to have a relationship there, but not from the investment point of view. A slight segue, we don't have time to go into the weeds of this, but I recently found out that Football Co. is ultimately owned by PIF in terms of where the money comes from, and they've had a big pivot towards Saudi as well in recent years. Is OneFootball specifically up for sale now? Well, I mean, let's play the audio from Patrick. I asked him about the future. I've asked him, where they go next. And if all of this has been a kind of exercise in, of course, turning the business around, but specifically looking now for more investment. And at a time when sports investment is so prioritized maybe towards, AI tech companies, which, is not an area OneFootball's massively involved in. How has OneFootball got into a situation where it could be attractive for investors? And this is what he told us.
I'm now with OneFootball for 8 years, and there has been a lot of investment. I started when we were 100 people and had a 100 million euro valuation. Then we peaked at $1 billion, and then we, as you know, we had a near-death experience some time ago, and now we're raising from the ashes, like Phoenix from the ashes. It feels like, honestly, I don't know. we do our job. I think our main objective over the last 3 years is really turning this baby into profitability. So we become a serious adult with a serious top-line revenue number on top of it, because downsizing company is one thing, but growing business is the other thing. It's complete different disciplines. We manage both, which I'm very proud of, together with Moritz and the management team and the whole team. Actually, we did a great job on this one. If there's an acquisition or a strategic investment, honestly, I can't tell. I don't know. I really don't know. At the moment, it really feels amazing to be independent and not being dependent on fundraising again and asking for money, because we're not burning anymore. That really feels good. And from there, I think the interest will come. I'm quite sure that, because with all investors that we spoke in the past, they were interested in the model. They see, okay, that's the future, because we have user data, we have customer data, we have a much more intelligent business model than just pure advertising or affiliate stuff. So that draw attention towards our direction all the way. But the number one ask, and times has changed, is speak again if you're profitable. And that's happening this year.
Fascinating stuff there from Patrick. Good interview, Martin. Thank you. OneFootball have never been profitable to our knowledge, and they're looking to turn a profit for the first time. Interesting to see if they get there in 2026, and therefore what the future looks like in terms of possible investment. So, story that we will follow, no doubt. We will take a quick break, and we'll be back with any other business and a look ahead.
From private equity to global media and US college sports, unlock the most trusted data and insights in our reports. Explore more at sportbusiness.com.
Hello, and welcome back to the final part of the Sport Business Podcast, where we look ahead to the weeks and months ahead in the sporting world. Martin, a bit of a selfish look ahead. I'm off on holiday to Portugal, so I'm going to leave you for a couple of weeks. But there is a tenuous sport industry link, and that is the news this week that Benfica just will not let this centralisation of rights go through in Portugal. The latest move from Rui Costa, he of number 10 AC Milan fame, he delivered a petition on the 7th of August to the Parliament, essentially calling for the suspension of the rights process. So it's not really a legally binding challenge, but there's going to be, I think, 60 days now to get people to sign up the petition, basically, to call for the full suspension of this tender. So I'll try and find out what I can from the great and good of the Portuguese holidaying market.
Yeah, you've almost forgot to say that you're going to Portugal, that being the link.
Did I not say that at the start? I said
you're going to Madeira.
Link. I am going to Madeira. I'm going to go and have
Are you
a
going to
look
watch
at Ronaldo's
Maritimo?
statue.
Are you going to Funchal?
I'm very near Funchal, yes.
So my dad went to Funchal and brought me back a Maritimo shirt, which looks like, I'll send you a picture of it later. I can only imagine if the Spar had a football team, this is what it would look like. It's very green and red and a size too big. Apart from that, it's a cracker. But
okay, well, I will send you back a story if I get one. But if not, I'll just be on the beach. So.
Excellent. I'm kind of looking ahead to the weekend of athletics action in Birmingham, partly because of the controversy, actually, around seats. Have you been to the European Athletics Champs? I went to the one in Barcelona. Have you been? It's a fun event.
I have not, no.
I got offered a full wheel of Le Gruyere cheese by a man there. Let me specify that they are a sponsor and a long-time sponsor.
Okay.
He was going to send it via post in the middle of the summer. Could you imagine that?
Wow. That would have been a very flat parcel.
Yes, I'd also like to clarify that he didn't send it, I didn't receive it, and no integrity rules have been broken, which is the truth. But yeah, Barcelona may be slightly less of an issue around empty seats as this has been. It's been a big story in the UK. There's been huge amounts of empty seats, which there's two sides to this. The first side being, clearly it looks horrific on the opening days. The crowd was listed as 13,623. Didn't count them, so I don't know, but the capacity's 23,000, which is less than it was. This is the Alexander Stadium on the outskirts of Birmingham. Less than it was for the Commonwealth Games 4 years ago. And there were just huge gaps that people were flagging up on socials. A bunch of athletics celebs, BBC commentators and so on have complained about it. And it's an own goal because if that's your first experience of it, you might just switch off and not watch it for the rest of the week. The flip side is the reason it's bigger, or the reason that there's some empty seats, is the increased capacity because they are expecting sold out weekend. So if they do get a sellout Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then there's maybe let's look at this in a slightly different way. However, if you're going to know you get that many empty seats on a Monday evening and a Tuesday evening as well, or even during the day, which are always a tough to fill, I mean, I just can't see why they couldn't have got schools around Birmingham to still on holiday or just some initiatives to really fill it up. It looks bad. And as usual, the pricing is the main thing. The fact that the tickets, and there was a lot of £26 tickets. I think there was some £40 tickets, but it's the fact that the home straight tickets, which cost £150, weren't reduced for Mondays. So, still haven't got it right. Major events organisers and tickets, not quite got it right.
Really doesn't look good. And athletics is a sport that really does need full stadia, doesn't it, to draw you in. The look on camera of empty seats is not a good one. I heard that the pork rolls were going £18 a pop, apparently. That's a bit expensive for a pork roll.
What is a pork roll? Is it a sausage roll? Or is it a roll with pulled pork? Because there's a big difference. It must be a roll with pulled pork.
I reckon it's a lump of pork rather than a sausage roll. Because that's punchy for a
I'm expecting a full hog roast for £18.
Maybe it is. Maybe. Get yourself down. There's plenty of seats.
I mean, I need to lie down after a pork roll. I'm sure I could do. What have we got? Any other business? What has tickled your fancy?
A couple of things, talking about people having a lie down. I'm sure everyone has seen this, the player for Coritiba in Brazil. Have you seen his goal celebration?
I have. Is he okay?
Yeah. He is okay, thankfully, so we can talk. I just wondered if there's any clubs looking for sponsors. This is a health insurance one for him. He fell down a hole, and the goal was disallowed, which is even more embarrassing for him. But I preferred the one in Uruguay. Have you seen this? This is one for RAC.
The crash.
The crash. Second division game. A player boots the ball onto the motorway, essentially, and as the cars slow down to avoid the ball, there's a car crash. So there's opportunities here for brands to get involved in.
Green Flag. They used to sponsor the
RAC.
FA.
Well, there you are. Maybe they've got a Uruguayan branch that they can activate around. But they tickled my fancy on socials this week, I have to say.
Thank you, John, for your whimsy. And I wish you a nice time in Madeira. Enjoy the cake. We are going to be taking a 2-week break from the pod, very French style. And we will be back with you very soon with more big news and analysis from the industry. But in the meantime, please do check out sportbusiness.com and also Sport Business Media and Sport Business Sponsorship for the most accurate and up-to-date rights fees. And we will be back with you very soon. See you later.